Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Morning heat had not yet pressed down on the Arizona desert when Riley Keaton crossed the flight line at Luke Air Force Base. The hangars held the nights cool a few minutes longer, engines quiet, metal still. She moved with the habit of someone who knew every echo in this place, every smell of fuel and hydraulic fluid, every flicker of status lights along a jet's spine. Crew chiefs nodded as she passed. She didn't need to speak. People straightened anyway. Inside Hangar 47, Cole Ramirez was half under an access panel, a lamp clipped beside his shoulder, tools laid out in clean rows. He glanced up, read her face, and went back to torque checks without a word. That was how they worked. No ceremony. No wasted motion. Riley paused, scanned the checklist on the tablet, and tapped a note. Cole grunted approval. Everything was trending right. Down the corridor, the elevator to the underground briefing room hummed open. The air shifted cooler. Screens woke to blue maps and scrolling logs. Avery Shaw stood at the table with a stylus in her hand, stitching altitudes and timings across a projected airway as if she were sewing a seam. Dylan Mercer worked the comms console, headphones on, eyes flicking between spectrum graphs and a set of encrypted packets that hadn't matched anything in last week's pattern library. He lifted one finger to stall conversation, listened, then exhaled. Same source range, different header, he said. Somebody changed the wrapper. Riley leaned on the edge of the table, taking in the rhythm. The bass outside stayed loud with forklifts and tow tractors, but in here the sound was controlled, a heartbeat of fans and quiet voices. Routine was a comfort until it wasn't. Avery slid her a view of the Sierra Nevada, valleys, ridgelines, dead zones where radar went thin for a moment and then came back strong. The kind of terrain that punished anyone who guessed. The door opened. General Thomas Calder entered without noise, but the room still tightened. His look passed across the team and settled on Riley. He didn't posture. He never had to. We're adjusting priorities, he said. Traffic in the northern corridor shifted last night. Not volume, discipline. Whoever's talking out there learned from our last scrape. They're testing routing, delay, and burst size. I want eyes inside the maze before it hardens. Riley didn't ask for the rest. If he was here this early, it mattered. She studied the overlay Dylan threw to the main screen, short transmissions, irregular spacing, bouncing through a path that felt like someone walking in snow and trying to step in their own footprints. Not clean. Careful. Avery pinched and dragged the map, highlighting a valley where 3 routes converged for 90 seconds twice a day. A window small enough to make most people shrug. Riley didn't shrug. We prep for rehearsal at 14, Calder said. I'll finalize tasking by then. He paused, then added, if we go, you lead. It landed like it always did, a weight and a promise at once. He left them to the work. Riley walked the plan from fuel to weather to comms. She asked for the boring parts first. Boring was where missions failed. Cole put eyes on every line that could chafe, every connector that could vibrate loose in turbulence. Dylan built a comm split with layered fallbacks, primary silent unless they had to speak, secondary writing a harmless civilian profile, tertiary piggybacking a beacon no one ever noticed because it never moved. Avery tested 3 NAV trees and cut the ones that depended on luck. Outside, the sun cleared the hangars and turned the ramp white. Heat shimmer started off the concrete. Training sorties lifted and climbed into clean blue. Riley watched one go through rotation, gear coming up, a small hinge in a big machine working exactly right. She liked small hinges. They kept you honest. By midday, The room smelled like coffee gone cold and plastic warm from screens. Threads of chatter from other floors leaked in and faded. Dylan rolled back from his console and pushed a graph across the table with 2 knuckles. The header change isn't cosmetic, he said. They're gating transmit with terrain. Short bursts when terrain masks the lobe. It's smart. Avery lifted her eyes. Then the valley pinch is not an accident. It's their metronome. Riley pictured the mountains, the shadows that arrived on schedule, the way sound and signal bounced when the air cooled fast near dusk. She saw approach speeds, climb rates, what a course correction would cost at altitude and what it would cost 10 seconds later if you waited. She saw the risks as a list, and the list did not scare her. It just asked for order. Calder returned at 1400 with a folder he didn't open. We're not greenlit, he said. We're amber. Keep building like the answer will be yes. He looked at Riley again, not for a long time, but long enough. I'll have your window by nightfall. The team held flightline hours and briefing room focus until evening folded the desert into long stripes. The base kept moving. Forklifts again. Fuel trucks again. Nothing dramatic, which was how preparation should feel. Riley took one slow lap through Hangar 47 with Cole, touching nothing, checking everything. She stood under the wing and listened to metal cooling. Cole watched her watching the jet. We'll have it, he said. She nodded once. Night pushed down clear. Lights on the ramp stared back at the stars. In the underground room, Avery dimmed the projections to a thin line and left the main chart up. Dylan labeled the new comms ladder but didn't name it. Riley stayed until her head was empty of noise and full of steps. She walked out to the edge of the tarmac and let the desert air settle across her shoulders. Amber wasn't green, but it was close. Close was enough to sharpen everything. When she finally turned back toward the hangar, the base felt like it was holding its breath, the way it always did before someone told it what came next. Riley didn't rush. She didn't need to. If the window opened, she would be ready to move through it without wasted motion, without second-guessing, with the team exactly where they had to be. And if it didn't, they would keep cutting until the maze showed a seam. That was the work. That was the job. Tonight, it began with a call that cut through the quiet like a switch being thrown. Calder's voice on the secure line was short. The window was real, 21 minutes after nautical dusk, 90 seconds of cover, then gone. Amber to green. Riley hung up, grabbed the folder she'd kept unopened, and walked fast toward the elevator. The desert air outside had cooled, runway lights holding steady like a metronome. She felt the click inside, no buzz, no rush, just the alignment of pieces sliding into place. Downstairs, Avery had the map dimmed to a tight corridor. Terrain mask peaks at +9, she said. If we push past 90 seconds, the exit cost balloons. Dylan swiveled from his console. Header scheme advanced again. Same source, different pacing. They know the valley helps them. Cole stepped in with a clean wipe on his hands. Ship's ready. The small stuff you asked for. Tightened. The thing you didn't ask for. I checked that too. Riley skimmed the room and watched everyone breathe. Nobody fidgeted. Good. Calder walked in with 2 aides and a look that said time was not for spending. Tasking finalized, he said. Primary objective is eyes and pull. Secondary is pattern confirmation. No theater. No messages. Get what we need and be gone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His gaze landed on Riley. Phantom 9, this is yours. The call sign landed without ceremony. She nodded once. Avery's stylus paused in midair, then kept moving. The last-minute checks were the kind you only learn to love after years: battery redundancy, pressure seals, comms fallback, fuel margin that seemed generous until mountain winds stole it bite by bite. Dylan rehearsed silent counts and touch codes, a language of taps and narrow glances. Avery ran the turn points and then ran them again, cutting the ones that looked clever but failed when you took away perfect weather. Cole stood at the edge, arms folded, ready if a whisper turned into a clunk. Riley watched, then called it. "We go." The ramp looked like a stage with no audience. Engines spun up, the nose light washed across painted lines, and the jet eased into motion like an animal that had learned patience. Riley settled into the seat, strapped, checked the world go small in the canopy frame. Mercer's voice came over the loop, low, clean. "Phantom, primary cold, secondary warm. Tertiary rides beacon if needed." "Copy," she said. Avery's hand hovered near the chart, then pressed it flat. "Climb 1. Turn 2. Fast in, faster out. Rotation, lift, gear up," and the base fell away without drama. Altitude built into dark that wasn't empty, just wide. Desert gave to foothill, foothill to rock, and the line Riley flew threaded between shapes that were closer than the radar would admit. Wind rolled off a ridge and tugged at the wing with hands that didn't care about schedules. She rode the bump, let the airplane settle, and nudged back on course. Avery's voice stayed steady. "Timing +2. Mask in 30. Dylan tapped a silent code. "Traffic ahead." "Not us. Not commercial." A sweep, then nothing. "They're probing," he murmured. Riley didn't let the thought expand. The valley opened toward them, a darker cut within the dark, and the 90-second seam lay somewhere inside it, an invisible door that opened if you hit it square and closed if you drifted even a breath. She eased power, set the nose where the math said it had to go, and let the jet breathe. Avery counted. 10 to mask. 7. 3. Now. Signal felt different when the terrain hugged close. Dylan's board lit with short, clipped bursts that would have been lost if the antenna looked the wrong way for a single second. He caught the first, then the second, stitched them into a rhythm that meant nothing until it did. "Header chain matched," he said. "Payload encrypt new, framing old. They're rushing it." Avery slid a vector left by a fingernail's width. "Exit shifts 10 degrees if they adjust again." Riley adjusted without looking down. The mountain's shoulder leaned against the night just outside the canopy. She trusted the numbers. 30 seconds in, the valley's wind brushed them sideways and then died like a breath held too long. Cole's voice wasn't on the loop, but she could feel his hands in the torque values he had checked 3 times. Dylan's fingers kept time on the console, quick little taps when the burst came early, longer when it lagged. "We have them," he said. "Copy modules in buffer. Need 2 more for pattern." Avery's count didn't stop. "Mask holds. 24. 19. Then the thing that changes plans happened. A drone icon blinked on the far edge of Dylan's scope, small, fast, and not part of any chart they'd blessed. It wasn't chasing, it was watching, a nail set in the wood to see what snagged. Riley didn't go stiff. She let her breath go out and come back in. "Maintain. No move unless it moves." Dylan squinted. "It's riding the same terrain logic we are." Avery recalculated exit costs with the drone's probable arc laid over them. "If it slides 5 more degrees, we can't leave without giving them our trail." The choice wasn't dramatic, but it mattered. She could abort, keep the night quiet, and give up what they'd already pulled. Or she could shift a hair early, pay a price in exposure, and finish the pattern before the door shut. Calder's directive rang in her head, eyes and pull, no theater. She measured the gamble. 2 more bursts and we go. If the drone noses our way, we cut early and dirty. Dylan, prep tertiary. Avery, draw me a line that's ugly but short. The next burst arrived late and heavy. Dylan swallowed it whole. 1 more. The drone nosed half a degree toward them, a tiny admission that it had noticed something it didn't like and couldn't place. Avery's line bent into a notch that would feel like jumping a curb. "Exit on my mark," she said. Riley kept the airplane on rails. The last burst came in clean, almost polite. "Pattern confirmed," Dylan said, voice tight with held air. "We have enough." "Mark," Avery said. Riley shoved the nose toward the notch, power breathing forward, wing angling into wind that wanted them higher and slower at once. For a second, the mountains felt too near, like the walls of a room closing at midnight. Then they were out of the seam and back in air the radar recognized. The drone shifted late and lost them. Dylan let out a laugh that wasn't joy, more like relief wrapped in discipline. They blinked. "Stay cold," Riley said. "They blink again if we gloat." The exit wasn't smooth, but it was clean. Avery rebuilt the path in front of them while the valley's logic unwound behind. Dylan mirrored the payload twice, then 3 times, cautious like he always was when the thing you pulled might decide to eat the hand that took it. The desert opened again. City lights far off looked like a rumor. On the way home, nobody said what they were thinking. Not yet. Riley felt the ache in her shoulders lift by degrees. She kept the picture in her head simple: altitude, heading, speed, and the next 5 minutes. The base waited with its squares of light and straight lines, a promise and a test. They weren't finished. Not until wheels were on concrete and the jet was quiet. Touchdown came soft, the way you want it when you've borrowed luck and paid it back in skill. Brakes, roll, turn off, the slow crawl to the line where Cole and his crew stood like they'd never moved. Engines wound down. Heat soaked the metal. Silence rose in layers. Calder met them in the underground room with the kind of nod that meant more later. Dylan pushed the payload into the secure guts of the system. Avery sat but didn't slump. Riley stood with her hands on the table and watched the map go still. It began tonight, and now it had changed. The maze had shown its seam. Tomorrow, it would show its teeth before the sun came up. The payload Dylan fed into the system lit off a chain of alerts in places Riley didn't usually see, rooms above her pay grade, doors with badges she didn't wear. Calder called at 0430 and didn't clear his throat first. "We're pushing again," he said. "Your valley isn't the end of it. Whoever we touched last night accelerated. Pattern is seeding along a second corridor. You'll get the picture when you're downstairs." He hung up. That was the picture. Luke AFB felt colder in the dark even with the desert around it. Hangar lights buzzed to life. Cole already had panels open, breath fogging once then gone. "I swapped the IMU you didn't like," he said, tone flat. "Your right side bus had a whisper in it. It doesn't anymore." Riley trusted men who found problems and didn't make speeches about solving them. She signed the work card and kept moving. In the underground room, Avery had split the map into 2 lanes of trouble. The first was their valley seam. The second cut east across the Sierra in a narrow shelf that looked friendly until wind maps told the truth. "They're playing leapfrog," she said. "Short bursts that make sense only when you stitch both routes. If we chase one without the other, we'll read noise." Dylan scratched a note, then pushed a waveform into focus. "And someone adjusted for us." Payload size stepped down, timing got messy. "That's not a mistake. That's a hand." Riley felt the grind start behind her eyes the way it always did before a long day. "What's the cost if we take both?" Avery didn't sugarcoat. "Fuel, timing, and margin. We'll be juggling 3 clocks while a 4th one we can't see keeps lousy time. If winds hold, it's doable. If they don't, we bleed options fast." Calder came in on that last word. He looked like he'd been awake since yesterday. "You're not getting a clean run," he said. "If they're reacting, good. That means pressure. But we won't chase them into theater. Eyes and pull, same as last night. You'll have tanker cover but only once. Make it count." The rehearsal ran hard. Sim pre-brief, sim run, sim fail, adjust, run again. Avery trimmed the tree until only branches that survived crosswinds stayed. Dylan built a comms ladder with steps so close together you could feel him breathing between them. Twice the system crashed under the weight of the new payload logic. They learned from our grab, he said, not angry, just filing the fact. Riley stood behind both of them and kept asking the plain questions. What do we need? What breaks first? What breaks second? Where do we stop? Cole rolled in a test rig and shook the airframe with a ground vibration profile that rattled toolboxes. A loose fastener clinked somewhere deep, and he went hunting without waiting for permission. When he came back oily and satisfied, he only said, "Found it." She didn't need the story. Midday brought wind advisories out of the passes. The shelf Avery wanted for the second corridor would turn choppy by dusk. "It will steal speed and hand it back at the wrong time," she said. "We carry more fuel and go slightly lower, or we carry less and commit to perfect timing." Perfect timing didn't exist. Riley picked more fuel and planned to pay for it in climb. Dylan frowned at the fuel numbers and rerouted the comms ladder to slip inside radio clutter from a distant training area. "If the shelf kicks us," he said, "this is the only way I keep signal without shouting." Calder listened to the update with his jaw set. "We'll widen your window to get you both seams," he said. "But we won't widen it twice. If the second corridor looks like bait, you leave it." He looked directly at Riley. "I'd rather miss data than lose the team." She nodded. She always did. It didn't make the choice lighter when it came. Afternoon bled into evening without anyone admitting they were tired. The base ran the same songs, tow tractors whining, a far-off whistle, boots on concrete. Riley took one lap outside and let the heat falling off the ramp remind her what the jet would feel like when it came back, ticking and alive even when it slept. She breathed once for the day that had already happened and once for the night that hadn't yet. Briefing at 1900 was short. Avery laid out the first seam, the pivot, and the shelf with no extra words. Dylan called the ladder and the dead handoffs if something went sideways. Cole stood at the back, arms crossed, eyes on the plane diagram like it could misbehave from across the room. Calder ended it. "You're not showing them who we are," he said. "You're learning who they think they are." Taxi felt different once you touched an enemy's plan and felt it twitch. Wheels bumped a seam in the pavement Riley had known for years. She liked knowing it was still there. Rotation. Climb. The desert fell away again. Night didn't glare. It held its light close. They hit the first corridor on time. Dylan stitched 3 bursts, Avery nodded, and Riley rode the wind like a stubborn dog on a short leash. Pivot was clean. The shelf was not. The wind had lied by 10 knots and then told the truth by 20. The jet shouldered it, but physics took rent from the schedule. Dylan gritted his teeth as the ladder slipped half a second. "I can keep it," he said. "But I'm going to owe you later." Avery's stylus hovered. Exit cost rising. Riley took the nose down a hair to buy energy, then paid it into the turn early to beat a gust that liked embarrassing pilots. The shelf bucked. A warning chirped, not angry, just honest. Dylan tapped a code and made a small sound low in his throat. They shifted again. Payload got thinner, then fat. It's hand-edited in real time. Avery didn't cuss often. She did now, softly. "Someone's watching us watch them." They had enough to call it and leave with something useful. They also had just enough time, if the wind gave back a few knots, to try for one more block that would confirm how the 2 corridors braided. Calder's rules were clear. Riley weighed them against a picture of the map that didn't quite lock. "One more block," she said, tone even. "If we miss the next gate by more than 3, we dump and run." The wind gave back 2 knots, not 3. Dylan stretched the ladder like wire. Avery shaved the corner so close it felt like sandpaper. The burst arrived fat and late and perfect. Dylan caught it and pinned it. Pattern link confirmed, he said. We have the braid. Exit cost came due. The shelf kicked them twice and then tried to take a third bite. Riley put the wing where it needed to be and didn't argue. The jet shivered and went through. Desert opened. Radios stayed quiet. City lights came up like a slow tide. Back on the ground, engines spooled down, metal ticked, and tension bled away in layers you couldn't see. In the room below, the braid unrolled across the screen. Analysts who didn't come to briefings leaned in. Nobody clapped. Calder didn't smile. Good, he said. Then he added the part that made everyone straighten again. They're adjusting faster than we expected. Tomorrow, if we press, they won't just shift headers. They'll move pieces. If there's a trap, we'll find it by not stepping in. Sleep in shifts. We run again at dusk. Riley stayed after the others left and watched the map until it stopped looking like lines and went back to being land. The maze had more than one seam. It also had hands. She could feel them on the other side, nudging, learning her timing the way she was learning theirs. She didn't hate that. It made sense. It meant the next decision would matter more than the last. She turned off one screen and then the next, let the room go dark, and listened to the fans spin down. Tomorrow would show its teeth again. She planned to keep hers, and the day tested that plan from the first brief. Calder's update was blunt. The braid they mapped overnight shifted again, not just timing but topology. A third spur appeared off the shelf, shallow and mean, like someone added a side street to watch who took it. If they're baiting, Calder said, don't bite. We want proof, not pride. Riley nodded and set her jaw. Avery marked the new spur in red. Dylan rewired the ladder so he could split attention without shouting. Cole tightened what was already tight and told her nothing would rattle first. Dusk dragged. When the window finally came, it came small. Taxi, rotate, climb. The desert went flat and then folded into dark ridges. Winds were cleaner than last night, which made Riley suspicious. Clean winds meant somebody else chose chaos. The first corridor behaved. 3 bursts, then pivot. Dylan's fingers tapped steady. Avery's counts matched. The shelf rolled under them on time. So far, so good, she said, which nobody ever says unless they know the next part won't be. The spur lit up on Dylan's scope like a cheap trick with real teeth. A thin, staccato signal danced just outside their planned arc, the kind that begged for a look. Avery measured the exit cost in her head and then said it out loud. We can touch it and live if we're perfect. If we're anything less, we leave fingerprints. Calder's voice wasn't on the loop, but his rule was. Eyes and pull, no theater. Riley kept the nose pinned. We ignore it until it ignores us. The spur kept humming. It knows we're here, Dylan said, not dramatic, just factual. They took the braid's next block and the one after. Then the shelf punched from the west, a sudden hard shoulder Riley had predicted and still didn't like. The hit shoved them a hair high and a hair late. Half a second doesn't matter until everything depends on it. Dylan dragged the ladder back into phase. Avery shaved the corner. We're paying later, she warned. Copy, Riley said, and paid now instead, dropping the nose a tick and feeding power to beat a gust that wanted to make them look clumsy. The trap didn't spring with radar. It sprang with silence. Dylan's board stayed alive, but the space around them went empty in a way that wasn't natural. They killed their own chatter, he said. They want us blind to them and loud to anyone else. Avery's stylus froze. If we hold plan, we walk into a box we can't see. Riley felt the choice arrive, clean exit with partial data, or a cut across terrain that would keep them masked but tear up the timeline. She pictured the team, the jet, the promise. We cut, she said. Short, low, ugly. Avery drew a new line that disrespected pretty flying and respected physics. Dylan prepped tertiary and stacked 2 decoys on standby. Riley rolled into the cut. The valley rose like a wall and then turned into a seam just wide enough to accept them. Turbulence grabbed the wing and shook it like a hand that didn't care about rank. Alarms stayed quiet. That helped. The spur flashed again, closer now, as if it hated being ignored. Tertiary hot, Dylan said. Decoy 1 ready. Hold, Riley answered. If they don't point at us, we don't wave. They slid under a ridge line at a speed that made the airplane honest about its weight. Avery counted in a low, flat voice. 10. 7. 4. Clear. The floor fell away. Dylan grabbed a fat burst that broke the silence like a glass dropped in a quiet room. That's the core, he said, breath tight. It's the piece that ties the braid to whoever's holding the strings. Riley felt the decision shift from risk to duty. Copy. We're done. Egress now. The exit arc should have been clean. It wasn't. A pair of small drones lanced across their path, not interceptors, watchers with teeth, fast, agile, and curious. Dylan didn't swear, but his hand flattened. If they sniff us, they'll call friends. Avery opened a narrow door on the right, expensive in fuel, cheap in time, and lined with rocks. Take it, she said. It's the only way they miss our scent. Riley banked into the door and let the jet talk. The first drone overshot. The second corrected too hard, then lost lift and bled away. Dylan tossed 1 decoy behind them anyway, a quiet flare in the wrong place. The drones took the gift. Now the tanker mattered. They'd bought data with fuel and time. Riley called the hookup without drama. Night air steadied. The boom locked. Numbers climbed back into comfort. Dylan mirrored the payload twice, then again. Avery rebuilt the map as if it had always looked like this. The base appeared on the horizon, squares of light steady and patient. Touchdown came with more brake and less roll. Engines wound down. Metal ticked. People breathed. In the room below, the core packet unspooled into something that made analysts straighten like they'd been name-called. Routes, handoffs, triggers. A picture of intent. Calder stood with his hands on the table and didn't hide the gravity. That cut you took, he said to Riley, wasn't in the book. She met his eyes. The book didn't like the room we were walking into. He let it sit, then nodded once. You were right. He looked at the map, then at the team. They'll come looking for whoever stole the string. Which means tomorrow we won't be the only ones with teeth. Riley felt the fatigue arrive all at once, then move aside for the thing that always came next. Not pride. Readiness. She rubbed the bridge of her nose, glanced at Avery, at Dylan, at Cole. Nobody flinched. The maze wasn't just lines anymore. It had a face. And now that it did, she knew exactly how hard to hit it when the time came, and morning made that time feel closer. The core packet Dylan pulled had teeth of its own, handoff schedules, relay sites, a timing key that matched what they'd felt in the valley. Analysts filled the underground room, quiet but charged, stitching what the team brought home into a picture that finally held still. Calder stood in the doorway like he'd grown there overnight. We act on it today, he said. You won't be the hammer. You'll be the sight. Riley didn't argue. Hammers swing because sights line up. Avery reworked the map so it read like a checklist for other units. She marked entry points, dead zones, and the exact minutes when the braid went soft. Dylan trimmed the comms ladder down to signal flags any crew could run without thinking. Cole gave the jet a rest and put his people on everybody else's problems, torque, seals, little noises that turn big right when you can't afford them. The shift was real. Last night had been knife work, today was layout and measure, handoff and cover. By noon, the plan was wider than their cockpit. A reconnaissance flight from Nellis would thread the first corridor while a signals team out of Beale caught the second spur in a big net. A ground element west of the range would listen from high dirt and push decoys when needed. Riley's crew would fly outside the box, not inside it, high, cold, eyes out, ready to mask a stumble or pull someone home if the braid jerked. It wasn't glamorous. It was smart. Calder briefed the room with the tone he saved for real moves. "We're not chasing mystery," he said. "We're shaping windows. They hid in our terrain. We'll make theirs smaller." He looked at Riley last. "You'll keep the picture clean. If the maze tries to redraw itself, I want to know before it finishes the first line." She felt the pride somewhere deep and ignored it. Pride doesn't hold altitude. Afternoon brought wind models that actually told the truth for once. The shelf would stay jumpy but predictable. The team ran a modest sim, not the punishing loop of the last 2 days, just enough to smooth edges. Dylan packaged the core packet into a format that would survive 3 different systems and 1 worst-case hand jam. Avery programmed trip lines. If an enemy header shifted by a certain amount, a light would blink where the right people could see it. Cole walked the ramp like a shepherd and sent back quiet thumbs-ups from airplanes that weren't theirs. You could feel the base tilt from preparation to execution without anyone saying the word. Dusk settled in with less bite. Taxi was almost calm. Riley held altitude well above last night's cuts and stayed out of the seam that had wanted to keep them. Avery called gates for the other flights the way she called turns for Riley, measured, steady. Nellis on time. Beale on net. Ground is cold and ready. Dylan kept their ladder lean, eyes on a split screen of their own picture and the shared one in the ops stack. "Header shift minor," he said once. "They're twitchy, not clever." The plan worked because nobody needed to be a hero. The Nellis jet stitched 3 bursts in clean air. Beale's net caught the spur and pinned it. The ground team fed 2 decoys at exactly the right moment. The drones Riley hated nosed toward ghosts. Riley watched all of it the way a parent watches a crowded crosswalk, hands off, muscles tight, ready to grab if a car didn't stop. Nothing needed grabbing. She flew a slow arc that kept her outside their noise but inside their reach, and the picture stayed clean. On the way back, the radio stayed disciplined. No victory laps. No jokes. Riley listened to her engines and the small sounds inside a cockpit when everyone's doing their job and the airplane is happy. She thought about the cut she'd taken the night before and how today's plan had been born from it, stripped of flair, fat with utility. Calder hadn't said it, but the mission had turned a corner. The braid wasn't driving them anymore. They were pushing it where it hurt. Touchdown came early enough to feel like they were borrowing daylight. Cole met them with a nod that said nothing broke and he was the reason. Downstairs, the analysts had already laid out the composite. It was ugly in the right way, a network shaved down to the parts that mattered. Calder put a finger on a box that represented a relay no one had seen before the core packet. "This dies tonight," he said. "Not here. Not by you. But because of you." He didn't linger on praise. He shifted to instructions for people outside the room, then left to let the machine run. The team finally sat. Riley let her shoulders find the back of the chair. Avery rubbed the bridge of her nose and smiled without showing teeth. Dylan stretched his fingers like a pianist after a long set. "It's quieter in my head," he said. "Same," Avery answered. "No more guessing the shape while we're already inside it." Riley didn't say much. She watched the main screen where their lines were now reference, not rescue. Later, out by Hangar 47, the desert cooled the way it always did, shrugging off the day like a jacket. Cole leaned against a toolbox and handed her a bottle of water he pretended not to have saved. He nodded at the jet. She liked today better. Riley laughed once, low. "So did I." He tipped the bottle at the horizon. "They'll ask for more tomorrow." She capped it. "We'll give them less and make it enough." Knight brought a small call from Calder. "Relay is quiet," he said. "Our friends are slow to notice. That won't last. Be ready to fly or stand down with equal discipline." She said, "Copy," and meant it. Readiness cuts both ways. Sometimes the hardest thing is not launching. Back in the underground room, Avery left the trip lines lit but dim. Dylan archived their ladder and wrote a note for whoever would borrow it next. Simple, clear, no ego. Riley stood alone for a moment, hands on the table, looking at the same mountains that had tried to swallow them 2 nights ago. They looked smaller now, not to the eye, but to the mind. The maze still had walls, but the doors were marked. When she stepped outside, Luke AFB sounded like itself again, forklifts, distant laughter, boots without hurry. Resolve doesn't shout. It breathes. She walked the edge of the ramp and let the quiet lay over her like a blanket you trust. Tomorrow would bring the last piece, not a chase, not a cut, but the part where you write down what matters and set it where others can see. She wasn't hunting shadows anymore. She was setting standards. And for the first time in days, she let herself think about rest, not because the work was finished, but because it was finally under control didn't mean it was over. Morning made that clear in the plainest way, a quiet call from Calder, a short update, and a request that sounded almost like a courtesy. "Write it up," he said. "Not the hero version. The version someone can use at 2 a.m. when they're tired and the wind is lying." Riley said yes and felt the weight of a different kind of work, slow, exact, and honest. In the underground room, Avery already had the map cleaned to hard lines and simple arrows. She removed what looked clever and kept what survived weather and pressure. "This is the spine," she said. "If anyone adds muscle, it should be for support, not show." Dylan built a package around that spine, comms ladders labeled like street signs, timings that didn't rely on luck, and trip lines with plain words instead of jargon. "If a crew chief can read it, a pilot can run it," he said. Cole checked the technical annex without being asked. "No miracles," he told them. "Just settings that don't bite you when the air gets choppy." They wrote all day. Not prose. Steps. What to do, when to stop, where to give up something small to save something big. Riley kept hearing Calder's rule, eyes and pull, no theater, and made it a header. She added the part about pride, the part nobody likes to put in writing: if you start flying to prove a point, you'll miss the point. Avery added notes about wind that sounds friendly and isn't. Dylan listed 3 signals that look important and are not, and 2 that look boring and will end your night if you ignore them. Cole stapled a single page about noises you hear through your boots that don't reach the gauges until it's too late. It wasn't pretty. It was useful. By evening, the package felt like a tool you could hand to someone in trust. Calder came down, read in silence, and set his hand on the cover once. "This travels," he said. "Nellis, Beale, farther." He looked at Riley. "Your name is on it because you'll answer for it when the next crew has questions. That's not punishment. That's ownership." She nodded. Ownership she understood. Knight brought one more push, external teams using the package in the field. Riley's crew flew high and wide again, watching the picture, keeping the edges clean. The plan held. Decoys ran when they needed to. Drones chased ghosts. The braid twitched and then slowed like a thing that realized the room had changed and didn't like it. Riley didn't chase the feeling. She kept altitude, kept speed, kept the team ready to mask a stumble. No one needed saving. That was the point. Touchdown came late, with no drama. In the room below, the last charts were stamped and filed. Analysts shook hands without speeches. Calder dismissed most of them and kept Riley, Avery, Dylan, and Cole a minute longer. "You did what we ask professionals to do," he said. "You stayed inside the problem until it was smaller than it looked and bigger than it sounded, and you left it better than you found it." He wasn't a man for long praise. He ended with orders. Stand down for 48 unless I call. Sleep like it's part of the job. Because it is. They tried. Riley showered, ate, and closed her eyes knowing the base would not fall apart if she wasn't watching. She woke before dawn anyway. Habit wins. She walked to hangar 47 and found Cole already there, hands in pockets, breathing in the cold oil smell that meant everything was fine. He cocked an eyebrow. 48 hours, huh? She shrugged. We're practicing. He laughed once, then went to bother a torque wrench for no reason except he liked the feel of work done right. Later, Avery and Dylan joined her in the underground room, not to plan, but to tidy. Avery archived her maps in a set marked simple. Dylan left a note in the system that said what he wished someone had told him on his first day in this job: you don't have to be clever, you have to be clear. Riley added one line under the header, not a motto, just a reminder. Measure twice. Fly once. By afternoon, messages trickled back from the units using their package. Quiet affirmations. A pilot who said the shelf didn't surprise him this time. A comms lead who said the ladder felt like breathing. A ground sergeant who said the decoy page read like advice from a friend. None of it loud. All of it enough. Riley sent short replies and kept them shorter each time. The tool was the point, not the authors. When the sun dropped, Calder asked for a small ceremony, the kind that fits inside a briefing and ends before the coffee cools. People stood where they usually stood. He spoke without notes. He named the work, not the legend. Phantom 9, he said at the end, meeting Riley's eyes, is not a title you wear to be seen. It's a standard you carry when no one is looking. She answered with the same nod she used in the cockpit. It felt right. They went back to life. The base sounded normal again. Forklifts, static on a radio, boots with somewhere to go but not in a hurry. Riley walked the ramp and thought about the hours that had stacked into these days, each one a hinge that could have stuck. She remembered the valley seam, the shelf, the cut that wasn't in the book, the trap sprung with silence, the drones that wanted a scent and got a decoy instead. She remembered the briefing where they were the sight, not the hammer, and how being the sight changed the fight. In the quiet, she let the lesson settle where it would stay. Excellence isn't the big move. It's the 1,000 small ones that line up so the big move isn't needed. Leadership isn't talking louder. It's asking the right plain question when everyone is tired and would rather hear a fancy answer. Courage isn't ignoring fear. It's measuring it and then doing the next correct thing. She stopped at the edge of the concrete and looked toward the dark line where the desert started. The mountains that once felt like a mouth now looked like work, real, hard, and honest. Avery would keep shaving plans until only the necessary stayed. Dylan would keep building ladders anyone could climb half asleep. Cole would keep listening for the quiet clink that meant trouble tomorrow and fix it today. Calder would keep his promises tight and his windows small. And Riley would carry Phantom 9 the way it deserved to be carried, not as a crown, but as a checklist. When she turned back toward the hangar, the night felt good on her face. Not easy. Right. The job would call again. The maze would change again. Wind would lie and then tell the truth and then lie once more. That was fine. She knew the steps. Measure twice. Fly once. Eyes and pull. No theater. Keep the picture clean. Keep the people safe. If there was a legacy in any of this, it wasn't a story someone told later. It was the kind of quiet that follows a mission done properly, the kind that lets a base sleep because a team did the work when it was theirs to do. And when the phone rang next time, she'd answer the way she always did, awake, steady, and ready to move through whatever door opened.